Hey everybody, Mr. Stein here. Here's your lesson today. I'm sorry that I'm out, but excuse me, made this lesson here for you so you can keep going with some musical education while I'm away. Today's lesson is, as you can tell, about tetrachords. Okay, it's my favorite thing ever. Now, tetra comes from the prefix tetra, meaning four, chords, obviously groups of notes. So a tetrachord is a group of four notes. But not just any four notes. They are a very specific pattern of four notes. Now, there's a couple things that we have to know and agree upon before we can really get started with this. The first thing we have to know is the musical alphabet. Okay, the musical alphabet starts with A, and it goes in alphabetical order, B, C, D, E, F, all the way to G. Now, you all know this, but what happens after G? You start over again at A, and you just keep going. The pattern repeats itself over and over and over again. Same thing going backwards, okay? It just keeps on going in infinitely, theoretically, in both directions, okay? So that's the first thing that we need to all be on the same page about. One is that we are going alphabetically up through the letter G, and then we're done. The next thing we have to all be on the same page about is the concept of steps, okay? And steps are when you go from one letter to the next letter. For example, from A to B is a step, okay? From F to G is a step. And since our musical alphabet repeats, that means that from G to A is also a step. Steps can go forwards, steps can go backwards. So you can go from D to C. That's also a step. In music, we would say that's a descending step. Descending meaning going down. Now, the last thing, before I go on to the last thing, there are two different kinds of steps. There are half steps and there are whole steps. Okay. Before we talk about half steps and whole steps, though, let's talk about this piano keyboard up here. If you can place notes on a piano keyboard, then your job here becomes so much easier. Okay. The first thing you want to do is find two black keys like we have right here. Okay. This kind of like a little beaver teeth looking thing here. And they happen, you can see that this pattern of 2, 3, 2, 3 is happening all over the keyboard. If you can find a set of 2, the note just to the left right here, this is letter C, okay? And if you know that this is C, you can now fill in the rest with your musical alphabet. That makes this D, that makes this E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Get what I'm doing here? E, F, G, A. I can also go backwards. B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Now, what you're going to see, hopefully, is every time we've had these group of two notes, the one to the left has been C, but that pattern holds up here and it holds up here. Okay, so that's, and notice when we have a group of 3, the one to the left is F. Okay, same thing here, F. Same thing here, F. Okay, so you can see how this pattern is repeating itself. The pattern goes from here all the way to here. This is kind of, now, why is this C and not A? You got me on that. I don't know. That's how it goes. Okay, this is letter C. So if we can find out our musical alphabet on the piano, then finding tetrachords becomes very simple. Okay, what about these sharp and flat keys up here? Okay, or these black keys are sharps and flats. They are the accidentals. So anytime you have a note that's sharp or flat, you're going to find that note on one of these black keys. The white keys are all the natural notes. That's why we haven't written sharp or flat down here anywhere. Okay, now we're going to use this to talk about what a half step is and a whole step. So a half step is the smallest interval that we have in music, okay? Because a half step is when you go from one key to the very next key over, okay? That's a half step. This is a half step. okay? Now this right here, there's no key here. So E, this is a half step, okay? F2, this black key is a half step. These are all half steps up, okay? This is a half step down. From G to this black key is a half step down. F, there's no black key here, so this is the E and F are half steps apart. I usually indicate on music the distance of a half step with a caret arrow like this, okay? So I'll do this. I'll say B to C is a half step. E to F is a half step, all right? And I can do that everywhere that I go, all the way through. These are half steps. Now, a whole step is the other kind of step that we have in music. And just because math is still a thing, 2 half steps makes a whole step, right? Oh, sorry, I wrote this wrong. This should go here. Okay, so go back to our example here. If C, half step up, is this black key, and then I go another half step, that makes C to D a whole step. These are a whole step apart, okay? These are a whole step. Half step, okay? Half step. Now B to C is a half step, so another half step is here. So a whole step up from B is actually this note right there, okay? Same thing with E. E up a whole step is half step. So these notes are a whole step apart. Hopefully that's making sense. Now you've probably noticed that I haven't been calling these notes any, I just call them the black keys, okay? Because what we're gonna call those is gonna be depending on the next thing. So when I'm drawing out whole steps on the keyboard, I like to use this bracket symbol, okay? So I go from carets to brackets, okay? Brackets represent whole steps, carets represent half steps, okay? And that's how that kind of works, okay? Now you gotta get that down there. I'm gonna erase these markings because we're gonna go into sharps and flats, okay? So there's a couple of things when we're doing tetrachords. Tetrachords are a group of 4 notes. They follow a very specific pattern, as I said, and that specific pattern is whole step, and then a half step. Now these are the intervals, right? So if I've got 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is a whole step, and then a half step. That's the interval, okay? Whole step, half step. If it follows that pattern, it's a tetrachord. And tetrachords can begin on any note in the scale. Let's find one easy right now. Letter C, okay? Here's letter C. What's a whole step up from letter C? D. What's a whole step up from letter D? E. What's a half step up from E? F. So a C tetrachord is C, D, E, F. Do you see how finding the piano keyboard, finding the notes on the keyboard makes this very easy? You just plug in the intervals. Whole step, half step. Okay? Now let's make this a little bit trickier. What if I'm on F? Okay? We're going to have whole step to G, whole step to A, and then a half step to this key here. But what do we call that? Okay? Now, we've got a couple of things. I'm going to switch to our worksheet. So, here's our tetrachord worksheet for today. We have the keyboard up here, okay? And you notice how each black key has sharps and flats marked in, okay? Right here, sharps and flats. So, there are some rules for tetrachords. Number 1, you cannot repeat the same letter name, okay? The notes must go in alphabetical order. You cannot go from D to D sharp. Okay, you may not go from A flat to A. If you're on an A flat, the next thing you do has to be some kind of B. Okay, if you're on a D, the next thing up has to be a version of E. Now, hopefully, you're starting to understand why maybe it's important that these notes have 2 different options for naming. Okay, second rule. Do not mix sharps and flats together. So if your first note is a B flat, your next note cannot have a C sharp in it, okay? You can't go B flat, C, C sharp, right? It just can't do that. So if your first note's a flat, they've all got to be flats, okay? Or sorry, flats are your only other option to have, naturals or flats. If your first note's a sharp, like F sharp, okay? Whole step takes you to what? G sharp, not A flat, okay? And then the other rule is whole step, half step, okay? And your instructions are going to be finish the tetrachord starting on each of these notes. So let's go back to the thing here. Now, up here we have two different notes. If I'm on F, we said we were going to be working on F. A whole step goes to G, a whole step goes to A, and then a half step from A goes to this key. And since we were on an A, right, we have to now go to some version of a B. But this B has been lowered, so we're going to call this B flat, okay? It could be an A sharp, but we can't call it an A sharp because we just had an A natural. So we like B better, okay? Ding. There we go. Okay, so a F tetrachord goes like this. F, G, A, B flat. Whole step, half step. Make sense? Okay, so if we're spelling these out later on for our worksheet, we're down here, okay? We have right here C, we did this one together, D, E, and then a half step up, E is F, C, D, E, F. We just did F together. F, whole step, 1, 2, G, whole step, 1, 2, A, half step, 1 half step, 2, B flat. So we would fill in F, G, A, B flat. Now your job is, there are 12 of these. Can you fill the rest of them in? Starting with B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp. This is the only sharp one, okay? This is not the only one that's going to have sharps in it. It's just the only one that starts with sharps. For example, if I'm doing B right here, okay, and I'm playing the B tetrachord, the first whole step is 1, half step, half step. I go from B to this note. Since my last note was a B, this has to be some version of C, so C sharp becomes our option. Then another whole step, 1, 2. Our next option is D sharp, right? And then a half step to here. So B, the B tetrachord is full of sharps, even though sharp isn't in the name, okay? And that might be true for some of these other ones. So see if you can fill these in. If you can fill these in, your next challenge is, can you play them, okay? And that's all I gotta do is play 4 notes. Ta, 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 okay? Then you start over here. Ta, 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 ta. You just go through all of these. You might need to look up some fingerings, okay? But you could probably do most of these. I expect that some of the sharp notes might be, you might need to play them a little slower, but you can do it. So here's our assignment today. Put your name at the top, okay? Here's your reference for the keyboards. Here are your rules to remind you. See if you can finish filling in all the tetrachords using whole step, half step, not mixing sharps and flats, and not repeating letter names, okay? If you're ever confused, do your best, okay? Please work by yourself, and we can talk about this worksheet when I come back tomorrow. All right, good luck to you all, and I will see you in the AM. Bye.